This video is about the evolution of God of War from the 2005 years to the 2022nd year. What has changed and is it worth waiting a sequel? And with you ViGames, before the start, like this video and subscribe, and we begin. The God of War has 9 games in the series, of which 5 games are the main story and 4 spin-offs. The first part of the game was released in the distant 2005 years. The story began in 1999 years. It was then that Santa MonicaStudio was founded, which became the birthplace of the God of War. The company worked of Sony and was preparing to start development game for the PlayStation 2 platform. To do this, the employees created their own Kinetica engine, which allowed using the full potential of the platform to display a large number of highly detailed models. The main source of inspiration for the game for their Onimusha action series based on Japanese mythology and a mixture of an action move and ico puzzles. The original idea that formed the basis for the development of God of War sounded something like this: we want to make a game like Onishima but based on Greek legends. One of the author of the game designer David Jaffe. However, the developers chose a free approach to the ancient heritage. They were based not so much on the myths themselves as on their speculation Hollywood adaptation. For the author of God of War, it was importantly to convey not the text, but the spirit of ancient stories full of battles, heroism, tragedy, and passion. This is how the story of Kratos, the Spartan commander and favorite of the god of Ares, appeared. Trying to write the perfect soldier, Ares killed Kratos' family. This became a fatal mistake of the century. The incumbent warriors declared war on Olympus and goes to revenge on the offender. The main weapon of Kratos is the famous blades of Chaos chained the wrist of the warrior. They allow the player to cover a huge distance with blows and by doing in different combinations, hit several enemies at once. In the course of the passage, the hero also received new weapons and several magical abilities granted by the god of at once Zeus. Light Night and storms caused by Poseidon helped Kratos break throughout legions of enemies who stood in his way. But they will not give a victory without a deep study of the mechanics of combat. The game at Santa MonicaStudio turned out to be really hardcore and sometimes incredibly difficult. The main adventure of the combat system of the original God of War is cinematography. The game uses a fixed camera system. The players sees each battle from the most epic angle chosen by the developers. Location, characters, models, and animation as detailed as possible. The games also use the popular QTE system of the beginning of the 2000s. Critical moments like opening the gates and finishing of monsters are made in the form and a small game of middle class. They apport the game decision culmination in boss battles. These are battles with enemies of truly titanic size that force the player to use all his fight skills. The reward of the efforts in an extremely spectacular and bloody animation of the massacre of the monsters and the ends of the fight. However, in addition to battles, the gameplay of God of War also consists of exploring levels on solving puzzles. Most critics and players consider the aspect of the game to be the most conventional. Here the love of entertainment fails the God of War, for example, not being able to control the camera. It is easy to make a mistake and the calculation making a jump. However, these minor shortcomings did not prevent the God of War from gaining wide success with both of public and the gamer press. The rating of the game of Metacritics is nightly 4 out of 100 and sales 4.5 million copies, allowing it to get into the list of the even best selling project of the PlayStation 2. God of War won several Game of the War and made Kratos an idol of millions. At the beginning of the 2000s, it was a breakout. The gaming was still considered mystery a child's activity. The appearance of a brutal revenge game in the pantheon, which is so strange to sex science and ultra-violence, has become a symbol of the common changes in the industry. Santa MonicaStudio did not doubt for a second the God of War was going to be a success. Even the end creators of the first game ended with the message, Kratos will return. And the God of War really returned in the years 2007. The main task of God of War 2 was to improve the finished ideas of the first part and bring the results formula to perfection. The style of the game, the control system and even the arsenal of technicals available to the players haven't received ridiculous changes. All gameplay elements have become clear and more correct. Kratos had several new weapons which differentiate the fights. Magic has become more powerful, which gives reason to use it more often. Mysteries of the available tools has become necessary. The fights of God of War 2 are some of the most difficult in the franchise. Battle arena are often filled with deadly traps. For an experienced gamer, they become an additional way of response against enemies, but for an naivety players they pose a great danger. In the sequel, work was also done on areas in the decision of puzzles. Platforming and puzzles have become clearer and more balanced. A fixed camera no longer prevents uniform coping with the most difficult test, and the tests for identical have become more diverse. Finally, everything that was done excellently in the first part remained Sony and double in quality. Kratos is up against his necessarily experienced bestiary of opponents and twice as many bosses. Among these fights, the fight with the animation studios of the Colossus stand out, and it remembered by many and become a kind of symbol of the series of a long time. God of War 2 became the sound song of PlayStation 2. The game was released 4 months after the release of the next generation console PlayStation 3. Despite this, the game became a bestseller, 4,002,000 copies, and won many prestigious awards. As Battlefields and ancient tragedy, the situation changed from bad to the worst. The game suddenly ends on the epically skies of the storm and the able of the god by angry titans. What ended this story? The players found only 3 years later. God of War 3, 2010 years. Perhaps the most incredible fact about God of War 3 is that the game is developed on the Kinetica engine, like the first 2 parts, in addition to a variety of additional effects. The component power of the console made the practical many times more beautiful. Up to 5 enemies can now be on the screen at the same time. In the old parts, a maximum of 15. And the Kratos model consists of 20,000 polygons, 5,000 in the God of War 2. The characters stopped like conventional and the blood visually becomes similar to the real one, which made the inspired ultra-violence of the game even more spectacular of charity. Meanwhile, the gameplay has changed little. Perhaps the main innovation of God of War 3 is the ability to switch between different types of weapon and magic right during the combo. However, the main task for Santa MonicaStudio was not innovation but the convenience of the history of Kratos, and it turned out to be truly legendary. Boss battles turned it into change on a universal scale, and the revenge of the mad Kratos turned into a Castlefon, Titanfall, and to destroy the whole world. In the third part of God of War, players will have to face off with the most famous heroes and gods of ancient myth, from Hermes and Hades to Hercules and Zeus. The game received extremely positive reviews from critics and instantly became a wonderful hit. God of War 3 received many awards, including for advanced graphics slaughs, and became the 9th game in the list of the most successful battles of the PlayStation 3. In the 2015 years, the remaster of the third part of the Adventure of Kratos was released on the PlayStation 4. God of War Essential 2013. The completion of the original trilogy did not mean the end of the God of War franchise. God of War Essential is a game for you own, for fans of the franchise and the universe. Nominally, it's changed little in the series. The main novelties of the gameplay are the ability to change the blades of Chaos. With natural engineers, they are effective against different types of enemies, as well as an overall increase in the complexity of battles. The plot, meanwhile, tells the backstory of Kratos and constrains the hero with interesting, but little-known characters of Greek myth, like wonderful viewers. The main innovation of the game was the addition of a multiplayer mode. In God of War Essential, there are both competitive PvP battles and cooperative tasks in which two players defeat various monsters. However, as it turned out, the audience was fed up with the series in its current form. God of War Essential received generally positive, but low by Sony Santa Monica standards. The average score of the game on Metacritic is 80 out of 100. Network mode also failed to meet expectations. The lobbies and paid breakly pay. The developers realized that it was time to radically change the approach to the franchise. And we come to the most unusual game of the series God of War 2018 years. Sony understood that in order to be successful, rethink their legendary franchise, you need to find a person who understands its detail. It is not surprising that their choice fell on game designer Corley Barlow, who led the development of God of War 2 and left Santa MonicaStudio during the development of the third part. The new head of the team brought a lot of new ideas. Firstly, he chose a Scandinavian setting of the game. Secondly, Kratos different himself. Many developers suggest not to touch the story of the Spartan and come out with a new protagonist. However, Corey Barlow, who became a father shortly before starting work on the game, managed to provide that a fresh story can still be told about the warrior known for his bloodthirst. Indeed, the plot of God of War has dropped its former gigantomania and the desire to shock. Instead, it turned it into a drama. Despite the absence of a number in the title, this is a direct continuation of the general plot, which does not cancel the events of the previous game in the series. Kratos has a jet trying to forget about his past sin and protect his young son Atreus from cruel tempests. In accordance with the change in the stone of the narrative. The gameplay has also undergone and radical revision. The action in the first game of the main series is less abusement, but more elaborate. Each weapon feels different, and the animation are more believable than even. The camera no longer hovers over the battlefield, but is fixed to Kratos' shoulder. However, this does not mean that the game is not cinematic. In general, God of War has become more like a large-scale role-playing game. Kratos can perform additional tasks, get new equipment, and travel freely around the world. He does not alone. He is accompanied by his son, the demigod Atreus, who not only actively participates in the plot but also helped his father in battle. These drastic changes have made God of War the most unusual game in the series. All creative risks from times were just forgotten. The game was received extremely warmly by critics and ordinary games. She is the winner of Country's Game of the Year awards and the most highly rated game in all already successful series, 94 points of a new 100 of Metacritics. Some of the adventures of Kratos and his son also turned out to be able experiences, over 10 million copies, making the game the fourth best-selling project in the history of PlayStation 4. God of War Ragnarok. The most boring thing is to talk about the gameplay of these games, because it is completely in order and globally is not much different from the gameplay of God of War 2000 of the 18 years. The safe sequel fits just perfectly here, because the developers really took the previous part of the carefully twisted in little things. Burning is almost to the ideal. There are still two case competitors, battles with enemies in linear location corridors, and exploration of large levels with opponents, riddles, challenges, and quests. The most interesting things in the levels in which Kratos slightly grow up son Atreus has to play. The fight is limited and in combination, but Atreus is incredibly fast and knows how to shoot a bow in a champ. Episode for him could refresh the overall heavy combat system of modern God of War. In general, the consequences are expected. If you like God of War 2018, then you will like Ragnarok. And if not, then Ragnarok's innovation won't be enough to change your mind.